Hi class, let's take a look at example 9. Now we have to be careful on example 9 because the way that these problems are expressed, and we're told they're mixed numbers. So what this means is that they represent, so for example, the values of 1 and 1/5 actually represents 1 plus 1/5. So a mixed number represents a integer plus some portion of a fraction. So the 2 and 2/3, this is equivalent to 2 plus the values of 2/3. And I'm just putting it in quotation marks here. And there are different ways of approaching these problems. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the fractions. So let me rewrite them and put actually parentheses so that you see it. For this one, it's okay if you don't put the parentheses because it's a sum, but on a subtraction, you have to take into account the distributive property. So let me just rewrite them as this is 1 and 1/5 plus 2 and 2/3. And technically, I'm just going to add a set of parentheses, as I mentioned earlier. This is just for later problems where we're dealing with subtraction, since you would have to subtract both parts, the integer and the fraction. So at this point, I'm going to separate them. So this will be 1 plus 1/5 plus 2 and the 2/3. And let me just add the set of parentheses there. Like I said, this will be needed on a subtraction. Also, there's nothing outside of that parenthesis, so you could just drop them. So let me just rewrite them in this case. So we're looking at this is equivalent as 1 plus 1/5 plus 2 plus 2/3. And then once you have them in this format, it's just easier to add the integers first. So as we combine the integers, we're looking at 1 plus 2, this is equal to 3, plus 1/5 plus 2/3. And let me rewrite the 1/5. Or 3 over 1. And then what's easier here is to just treat it as 3 separate fractions. Your LCD is equal to 15. So you're going to multiply times 15 the first fraction, times 3 the second fraction, and times 5 the following fraction. And let me just rewrite it with the actual LCD. So we're looking at this is equivalent to 3 times 15 will be 45 15ths plus 3 15 plus the values of 10 15ths. And at this point, once you have them as a actual fraction with the same denominator, you can combine them. So this will be 45 plus the values of 3 plus 10. And we're talking about 15, or 45 and 10 would be 55 plus 3. I'm looking at 58 15ths. And let me just wait a second so I can take a look at the total. Yep, that's perfectly fine here. The only problem is if you express it as a improper fraction. Some of the problems, especially on the homework assignments, they're given as mixed numbers, so they're going to want a mixed number. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and technically divide those two. So it's going to be a total of 3. And I'm looking at 13 15ths. Let me double check. So on the side, 45. Yep, no, that's fine. Because on the side, I'm just multiplying 3 times 15 and then plus 13, that would be 58. So that's perfectly fine. Keep in mind that for some of the homework assignments, they may just want you to leave it as an improper fraction. But typically, if the numbers are mixed, they're going to want a mixed answer if you can express it in that form. That's actually it for problem 9. Let's take a look at problem 10. And in problem 10, notice that you have a subtraction. So we are gonna need these parentheses. And this is because you're subtracting both of the numbers. So let me just rewrite them and put the parentheses there so that it's clear. So this is 4 3/5 minus 1 5/6. And then I'm going to put the parentheses there. And then I'm just going to say that this is equivalent to, and let me separate the actual numbers. So this will be 4 plus the values of 3/5. And then minus 1 plus the 5/6. Now, keep in mind that you technically have these parentheses, and this is because for the 1 5/6, this represents the sum of 1 plus 5/6. But in this context, you're subtracting 1 5/6 from this number, so from the 4 3/5. So that's equivalent to having a negative on the outside that's going to multiply both of these. So we have to be careful on the subtraction problems. This is equivalent to 4 3/5. The first number, we can just drop the parentheses and then rewrite this as minus 1 minus 5/6. And then let me combine the actual integers here. And we're just rewriting them as, well, 4 minus 1 is 3. This will be 3 plus 3/5 minus 5/6, or 3/1. And at this point, we're going to need an LCD. So your LCD is equal to 30. So multiply the first one times 30 times 30, second one times 6, and third one times 5. And let me rewrite it as, this is going to be, well, 90 over 30 plus 18 over 30 minus 25 over 30. And then since we now have them over 30, let me rewrite it as a single fraction. So our single fraction, it's going to be 90 plus 18 minus 25 over the values of 30. And let me take one step and combine the numerators. So at this point, this is going to be equivalent to, that's going to be an 8, and 100 minus 25, which is going to, wait, give me just a second. So we're looking at, okay, so this is 108 minus the values of 25. That's going to be all over 30, and this is equal to 83. Give me just a second to double check the sum. That's going to be an 8, that's a 10, minus 25. Okay, no, we're good. Okay, so this is perfectly fine. But in terms of a mixed number, well, the 30 is going to fit twice, so this will be 2, and we're looking at 23 over 30. That would be the mixed value. And let me just carry that multiplication. That would be 60 plus 23 will be 83. Okay, that's it for this one. I thought we had an error, but we're good. Let's move it into another mixed number. And then here I see a minor problem. It's not a problem, but when we're carrying out the subtractions, or additions, you're gonna end up with an LCD. So what I see on problem 11 is that the values of 4 sixes reduces. So 4 6 is actually reduced as 2 times 2 and 2 times 3. And you can cancel the 2's here. And this is going to be equivalent to 2/3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the problem as 2 1/3 plus 3 2/3. And then at this point, let me separate them. I'm also going to put the parentheses there. They're really not needed because of the sum. But if you go back to the previous problem, if we had not made this value negative, then the whole thing would have been unfortunately incorrect. So let me separate this one. So we're looking at 2 plus 1/3 plus 3 plus 2/3. And technically, we still have the parentheses there. I'll remove it in the next step since there's no negatives on the outside to be added or subtracted. So at this point, I'm going to drop the parentheses and combine the like terms. So this will be 2 plus 1/3 plus 3 plus 2/3. And then at this point, let's combine the integers. So we're looking at, well, this will be 5 plus 1/3 plus 2/3. And this is actually great because we're going to end up with an integer. So this is 5 plus 1 plus 2/3, or 5 plus 3/3, which is 5 plus 1, which is equal to 6. Okay. In this scenario, let me just check the numbers that there were no errors. That's going to give us the 5. 4 sixes reduced to 2/3. And as it combines to the 1/3, that's 3/3, which is 1. And we end up with an integer. In this case, we could leave it as 6, since technically, well, the fraction cancels out as we combine the mixed numbers. That's actually it for this one. I'll put the rest of the problems in another video.